Hello and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I am your host, Troy Haynes, and I'm welcoming this morning one of my former high school jumpers. His name is Jack Wiseman. He's my first podcast guest that was a former athlete. So let's get Jack in here. He just checked right in and he's ready to roll. How you doing,
Morning,
Jack?
Coach. How we doing? I'm doing
Good.
good.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, it was a good week. I kind of been on top of the world the last couple of days.
I'm willing to bet. The rare feat of the double PR, right? It's a rarefied air once you've been jumping at heights like yourself for so long. A I think everybody gets two or three PRs the very first time they start, because you've never done it
Yeah,
before. So you get two or three or four of those, and then they become harder to get. So congratulations, Jack. What was that? Give us the feelings, man. How was it?
yeah. I've been talking about this since it happened because I've had that question asked a couple of times, and I completely blacked out. So I remember bits and pieces. But I think the big thing for me was I had kind of just been telling myself and picturing that exact moment all week
Mhm.
long. Since like Monday, I was saying, I'm going to get a shot at 7. It's going to be me and Kyle. It's going to come down to that. I'm going to need to make this height, and I'm just going to go do it.
Yeah.
So I kind of got there, and I was just like, I've envisioned this all week long for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And I just went and did it. And it was kind of like, wow, look at that. Just like I thought it up.
Right.
Um,
Awesome.
so yeah, it was an amazing moment, surreal. My dad was there to watch. All my friends were going nuts. We had a couple bets going where some of my teammates were going to shave their heads if I ever made 7 feet this season. So there were
Awesome.
there were a couple crazy reactions in the crowd for
I
sure, which
love it.
was
I love it.
pretty sweet.
All right. So give us some of the drama too. You mentioned Kyle Jenkins. So I told everybody on the podcast today that you're my first former athlete to come back and be a podcast guest. So there's that. And then you mentioned Kyle Jenkins, who was another one. You and Kyle and Aiden all went to the state finals back in 2019, right? So that
Oh yeah,
was a few years back, and you got to jump against him again. So how did it pan out? Because we know you PR'd twice.
yeah. Well, first off, Kyle's a great guy. I've always loved jumping against him since we were little. I mean, we've been doing it together for almost 8 years now, which is kind of
Wow.
crazy to think about.
Right.
Um, yeah. So it was really awesome getting to see him again. He was at San Jose State before this and just transferred to Long Beach State. So we had been
Mm-hmm.
keeping in contact, and I was just really excited to go jump against him again. And the guy's a monster. I mean, he has
Yeah.
gotten really, really good in the last couple of years. He came
Mm-hmm.
in at 6'9", I believe, and I think he made it on his second attempt by probably like 4 or 5 inches. It
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
it was a monster jump. So it was really cool getting to see him again. But I was kind of just like, I knew this guy's going to jump 7 feet. He's been doing it all year long. He's done it a handful of times. And I was like, if he can do it and he's going to do it right here, I got to join him. Like
Right.
I can't be the guy who's getting shown up anymore. And that I think that was another thing that was pushing me was Aiden's made it since high school. I'm
Right.
pretty sure Tyler Cash made it once he went to San Jose. Kyle made it. Joey Riddell made it. All these guys who I was
Yeah.
competing with and hanging with in high school have
Right.
started making that, and I was like, all right, time for me to get my shit together and
Right.
get over this bar.
So that's you mentioned
So
a couple of names there. Yeah. Aiden Garnett has just come back from his 2-year mission when he jumped 7 feet and won the WAC as a freshman indoor. Right. Crazy.
he did.
Because
Yeah.
he, of all you
Yep.
guys that you just named, he finished the lowest. He was sixth place at state, and then came back the very next
Yep.
year and jumped 7. Right. So, yeah. And then Kyle, you mentioned Tyler Cash. Tyler is no longer jumping. He's going. Is he going Air Force? I think he's going Air Force
Yeah,
or
I'm pretty sure he enlisted. Yeah, he enlisted in the Air Force. That's what I
yeah,
was saying, or what Kyle was saying when I talked to him because they were
yeah.
pretty good
So
buddies.
they were both together at San Jose State, and I believe he still is under the 7 foot mark. I think he might have gone 6'11" or 6'11 and a half a quarter, but he's right there, obviously, and he's got that capability. So Yeah, that's it's been a long time coming for you. That's the thing that was impressive. I'm just going to tell this story because when I was working with Jack in high school, you had jumped 6'6" over and over and over, right? And we got to your league finals, and I think you jumped 6'2", right? And he wins because there was nobody else to really jump against. And I believe your mom said, Jack, why don't you just jump 6'7", like skip 6'6" and go right to 6'7". And so Jack goes, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Let's roll." So you jumped 6'7" that day, and that kind of started the dominoes going because then we just started. I think you jumped 6'8" at CIF finals, and then 6'10" at the Masters meet, right? 6'9" again the next week at state. So it was like you were right there knocking on the door. But I've rarely seen anybody pass. I don't even think I've seen Jesse Williams pass that much. I was at a dual meet UCLA USC quite a few years back, and he was at, I think he jumped 210 and he passed to like, I want to say 225 or two something crazy, like a 5 or 6 inch jump like that. And I remember thinking at the time, because you just never see anybody do that. And I remember thinking, there's no way this guy can do this. And he didn't end up making it, but he took 2 really good jumps at it. So I remember being blown away by that. But you're like the second on my list of the all-time crazy past the heights guy, because you went from, what was it, 215 to 223? Was that
223 today? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was quite the leap. I think the conversation for me and my coach really was, and again, because this day was really calculated. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really an accident that any of this was happening. I mean, I've been telling myself, this is the situation you're going to be in. What are you going to do? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that stems from what I'm trying to go do in my career afterwards. Is you have to be really calculated in naval aviation.
Right.
So
Right.
you can't be accidentally ending up in positions and not having, every single decision planned out. So I've kind of been practicing, hey, what am I going to do when I get in this spot?
Mm-hmm.
So me and my coach Randy Bungard, I was talking to him and I'm like, "Coach, if I beat Kyle and I can go to whatever I want, since my school we haven't been able to compete yet because we're still in that transition period from D2 to D1.
Oh
There's
yeah.
no provisional mark, there's no regionals, there's no nationals. So I'm like, there is no other mark that I need to hit other than the school record, which is at 7.3 and a quarter. So I was like, Coach, I'm there today. Like, let's at least try it. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
point in wasting any energy. If I have a chance at it now, let's go for it.
Yeah.
So that was a 3.5 inch skip because I went to 7.3 3/4,
Yeah.
which, as you know yourself, is a lot of
Yeah.
height to skip at 7 feet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, and I might have gotten a little over my shoes, I think, wanting to do that. But my coach's thinking was like, if you're going to do it this season, you got to start taking jumps at it. You can't be
Yes.
skating around it and save it for the end. You got to look at
Yep.
that thing in competition.
Yeah.
So my first run through, I bailed because I looked at it and I was in a crazy lean. I was holding everything good. And I was like, wow. I mean, it felt like it was 8 feet. I was like,
Right.
that looks surreal.
Yeah.
Um, and so I talked to Randy and he's like, dude, just take a jump at it. You can do it. Like your hips were there on the last one. Just go for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my first attempt was really close. I kind of missed it just by my butt, just a timing issue. And then the last two were just awful because the 7 feet mark started setting in and I was like, wow, I did it. And I
Yeah.
started getting excited and I just, threw it away. But I think it was one of those moments where I'm like, wow, because that was a big skip for me to go from
Mm-hmm.
6'10" to taking jumps at 7'3". That's
Sure.
a lot of mileage to make up. I mean, that was one of
Yeah.
my idols in the sport, Sean Lee. That was his PR.
Right.
So I was like, it's pretty cool to be contending with some of these guys who I've looked up to for years and years and years.
Yeah. Well, that's like you said, it's almost like a power up, right? You got a power up, and now the interesting thing is once the lid is off the box, right? Once it's opened, you're kind of like, first of all, again, welcome to 7 Foot Club, right? And then secondly, you're like, now that reality is set back in, it's kind of like, well, I can, there's more up there, right? There's more. I've got more. You knew you had that capability back in high school. At the state meet, you're jumping against Tyler Cash and and Bo Allen, these guys that were good jumpers, and you were tied with them for the lead, right? At 6'9", you had no misses, and we're ready to go at 6'10", and it's like, you're right there. So I know that it's built up, little pent up frustration, right? But when you step up to that next level, now it's kind of like you can take a deep breath, and then, now knowing that you took good jumps at 7.3 and a 3/4, your brain can go, well, 7.2, what's 220? I can do that. What's 222? What's no big deal. So yeah, taking the jumps is huge, because I believe you have a jump memory bank, right? A timing bank, which everything has to change. I preach this all the time. You remember, I was like, look, straight, curve, takeoff. Flight is the only part of all 5 parts of the jump that gets longer as you go up, right? Because everything else might even get faster. You're approaching faster, you're leaning more, you're on and off the ground quickly, and then you're up in the air. So you got to fly and wait. The hardest part is to wait, especially the real bendy guys, right? The super bendy guys want to get into that layout, and you're like, no, you got to wait. I mean, it's logical, but it's really hard to change those timing settings in your head until you take some. So like your coach said, hey, getting these jumps in at this higher bar, you got to learn, right? If you don't wait to throw your head back, you clang your head off the bar at 7 3 3/4 if you throw it back at the same place you did at 7 feet even, right? So that's just, what an awesome day. Amazing.
Oh yeah, really great. I think something interesting you mentioned is, and I think a lot of high jumpers, once you get to a certain level, coaches start saying this to some degree, but I've been, since I was little, and I mean, I'm talking like freshman year of high school, jumping 6'3", I had coaches telling me, hey, you're going to jump 7 feet one day. And I was like, oh, cool. Just right over my head. I was like, all right, whatever. And then it became a thing where I think a lot of athletes are told that, and we're like, oh yeah, that's something just that people say. And it started becoming this thing where people are like, oh, hey man, when are you going to go jump 7 feet? I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe next year.
Right.
And I was just kind of at this point where I'm like, I can do this. Like, I can absolutely do this if I have the confidence and I'm just having a good day. Mm-hmm. And it was, I mean, I didn't even touch it, which was pretty rare for me. As you know, I usually get my hips a little involved when I'm going for PRs and stuff. And I had a couple of inches on every single part of my body. And I think that was, my first thought was, did I go under it? Did I just not even touch it and go right underneath? Right. And I'm looking around, and if you see the video, I look at my friends first who were standing on the side, and they just start going nuts. And I was like, okay, so I did go over it. Cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've forgotten, it's been so many years. The last PRs I got were like yours. I had a 2-day PR, or two and 1 day PR day against Houston in '86. I was jumping, and Lee Balkin came back to that meet, one of my former teammates. And it was the only time I ever beat Lee. I had to PR twice to do it, and I beat Lee Balkin. So I went 2 1/4 first time over that, and then 3 1/2. And I've also told this story many times. You have you and Aiden both have the pleasure of winning. Every time I PR'd in college, every single time, I did not even win the dual meet or the meet that I was at. It was like, 7 feet the first time against Stanford. I think Lee beat me 7-2 up at Cal. Both Lee and John Morris beat me, 2 1/4, 3 1/2 against Houston. I beat Lee. And then Mark Reed, who was jumping with Tom Tellez at Houston, jumped 7'4 1/2 to beat me. And I'm just like, what? What do you have to do to win a dual meet around here? I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. So, even when you PR, you can't do it. But so yeah, that feeling, I remember you're saying I did the run around and go crazy thing, because we couldn't have anybody down on the track at Drake Stadium, but 2 times in 1 day, kind of mind blowing. And then I remember taking jumps at 4 1/2 too, which were not bad. So yeah, I think it just kind of opens up, the lid of possibilities, right? You like,
oh yeah.
And I think the other thing that I was just thinking about this the other day, I go, for someone jumping 7 feet, for us, it's a big thing. For Americans, I don't think it means the same thing in Europe, because to them, everything's metric. They just compare themselves to other people, I think.
Yeah.
But over here, there's like the 7 foot club. And then, I mean, 30, is it 30 years? When did Fosbury start doing the flop he was in 68. So it's been
Yeah.
40, 50 years. Well, 50 years ago, 7 feet was the world record, you know?
Yep.
So when you look at it, you realize, I could have been a world record holder if I'm in a different era, So it's
Yep.
like, so that's a pretty amazing thing. And there really aren't that many people, that end up jumping 7 feet. There's all kinds of people, like you said, that have the potential. And then, how many people never pursue, never go on to
Yeah.
a college career. They don't go to junior college. They don't go to college. They're done. And then there's the late bloomers, that come out of nowhere that you're like, this guy was only jumping 6'4" in high school. And now all of a sudden they're jumping 7'2" or 3. And you're like, where do they come from? That doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty amazing stuff. So you talked about your new coach. This is something that last year, your longtime coach, who was also married to the head coach, right? Co-head coach and everything. They
Yep.
retired, and you got yourselves a new head coach. And I applied for that position and got unceremoniously shut down. So how did that all go down there?
Yeah. So we were hearing rumors that we were having Coach Kimberly Graham is our head coach.
Mm-hmm.
She is a former Olympian in the 400. So of course our school was kind of like, ooh, Olympian, like
Right.
perfect. And she is amazing. I mean, she was from day one. I think I've always kind of been of the kind of frame of mind where I want to go to practice and I want to get worked like a dog. Like I don't want to be sitting around.
Right.
I don't want to be screwing around. Like I want to be dead after every single practice, just because I'm making little deposits in the tank here.
Yeah.
And that was from day one. I mean, we were running 400 repeats as high jumpers, and there were people collapsing, falling over, injuries, and I'm like, this is the real deal. Like we're
Right.
going to be fast this year. And we didn't get Randy, who was our jumps coach. Kim was just kind of in the process of recruiting, so we didn't really get Randy until December.
Mm-hmm.
And he came around, and he's this super charismatic figure and very technical on the jump side. So he's not a high jump coach specifically, but he has us doing lots of plyometrics on a light level on the grass 3 times a week, 3 to 4
Mm-hmm.
times a week, on top of lifting and running.
Right.
And I think that has just given a lot of people the extra spring they need,
Right.
because that's something where, especially with a big team like ours and not a lot of funding, it's tough to get a coach who can work with everyone all day and do specific things.
Right.
So I think the big thing for us was he came out and he's like, all right, we're going to be out here for 2 hours where you guys are going to jump, and then you're going to do a core workout, and then you're going to do a general strength circuit, and then you're going to do your lower legs, and we're
Yeah.
going to blow up your shins and build them back together.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, who's always had shin issues, I mean, those first couple days, he calls it the rudiment, and it's a bunch of shin jumps on the track.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I could barely walk.
Yeah.
And he just started ripping us to the ground again. And a lot of people were like, I'm not going to be able to jump this season. I'm like, there's a plan here. He's
Right.
working on something. Just bear
Right.
with him. And sure enough, I mean, we've seen a lot of great performances early in the season. We had our pole vaulter set the school record
Mm-hmm.
at the first meet the other day, which was really cool to see. So he's been great. He's an exciting guy. I mean, just like us, a student of the sport.
Right.
I walked into the locker room and there was a picture of my 7-3 jump hanging up on my locker after the meet. Because and so it's cool to have. And I mean, Coach Darcy was the same way. So it's awesome to see and kind of get to meet other people like that who are like-minded, of just studying the sport down to the last detail.
Yeah.
And one of the big things we talked about early in the year was it was his basic opinion that I had gotten comfortable in college, basically. And that my 6'8", because 6'8" was kind of my height in college, where that was like when I was on a good day, 6'8" was pretty much guaranteed. 6'10", I'd struggle at a little bit. So I made 6'8" almost every single meet. Bad meets would be 6'6" to 6'4". And what he was saying is, he's like, look at all these videos of these guys jumping at 7 feet. How many of them are just jogging up to it and taking a nice, slow little approach and hopping over it? And he's like, that's kind of what you're doing. you're not really sprinting at the bar. And because you're not sprinting, you can't get into the lean. And you
Right.
can't really use your arms. And he's like, if we get you a little bit faster and change up your steps a little bit, he's like, it will be a free 7-foot jump. You won't have to
Yeah.
change anything.
Right.
And I'm like, all right. I remember being fast in high school. It's going to take some changing my frame of mind and timing and stuff. So we just started doing a lot of approach work. I mean, we
Yeah.
hardly jumped in practice for the first couple months. He was like, we're doing approaches today. We're doing 10 approaches.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And it just felt, I think there was something about my approach last Saturday that just felt right.
Yeah.
I mean, everything just kind of clicked, and I was like, I'm in the right spot every time. I'm hitting this crazy lean. I don't know if you slowed down that video, but that was the best lean I've ever had in my life. I mean, I could have touched my hand to the ground if I wanted to.
Yeah. The shot I put up on Instagram was what do they call it? The cover of the video.
Yeah.
I stopped it on that one because I could see, yeah, it was pretty sharp lean to the left for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so it was just one of those things where I'm like, wow. I mean, I've had this for 3 years, and it's kind of been with COVID and everything and getting on and off and getting back into the flow of things last year. It had been coming, and I had just decided I'm going to trust the program here and just give everything I've got. Because I think something a lot of athletes do, especially in track and field and in high school, is we're kind of on our own. If you're not at a big track school, it's kind of you and either your private coach or your high school coach against the world. Like, especially if you're competing at an elite level, there may be 2 or 3 of you who go to state, who are advancing to that level, who go to CIF. And so you kind of make these decisions about your career, not really listening to the advice that's coming from everyone else. Because you're like, well, I mean, I could jump this if I change all these things, but what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
And what if I can't go to college? And what if it all ends here because this doesn't work? And that's definitely a thought that I've seen in a lot of people's heads. And I definitely had a little bit of that in high school when I was working with Dwight Stones, where I was like, we just didn't work. I mean, my approach just didn't get me over anything.
Right.
And when I got to college, I was like, I have nothing to lose. I've got this job lined up afterwards. I'm going to go fly in the Navy. Like, that's set in stone.
Right.
So I'm like, what? I'm not going to be a pro, and I'm not going to drop out of track. I mean, I'm always going to be here doing 6.6 at the minimum. And that's cool. It's cool to be average. And I was like, so I'm just going to listen to every word out of my coach's mouths for the next 4 years. Like, everything they say, I'm going to lock that in the mental vault and keep it there and really just try and learn, because they've been doing this sport for 30, 40 years in some cases. I was like, and I've been doing it for 8. So I was like, there's got to be a little bit of wisdom there that I'm not picking up on. And I think it sure was. And I think getting rid of that, self-preservation and kind of just taking that leap of faith in the coaching and being like, I'm going to listen to everything. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck. And I'm just not going to doubt a word that comes out of their mouth, because this is their job.
Right.
And I'm a college athlete, and the fact that they have made this profession means they're onto something. And I think that was another big thing, was just being like, all right, I'm ready to go. Give me whatever you got. Let's do it this year.
That's an interesting point. We haven't really delved into that much here on Raise the Bar. And we talked many times about, training and speed and positions and everything. But the mindset is huge. We delve into it a little bit, but I think this is the first time I can remember thinking about, the trust in the coach. I've chronicled here many times the search. I was blessed with a good high school coach. Coach Halstead, God rest him, was this huge defensive line guy on the football team. And from my first year, we had a 3-year high school when I was at Millikan. So he was very not technical at all. It was like, just got us strong. He would have me jump up and down the bleachers, left-footed hops, all the way up, all the way down, skip a step, all the way up, all the way down. So I knew how to use my knee drive, and I knew how to use my arms, and he had 5 guys jump 6'10" in a 5-year in a row.
Wow.
Dave Wicker, 2 years, me, John Bareford, and I always forget the last one. Derek Moore. And, 3 of those guys were basketball players, and then I was the one in the middle that wasn't a basketball player. And so anyway, we leave that. And when I got to UCLA, like I said, for many times, the first 2 years I was coached by Dylan Lee, no coach, and that was a shocker because there wasn't anybody to put the trust in. It was like a blank. So I would walk around and look at I drew from weird places. Like I watched Art Venegas, one of the top throw coaches in the world. I would listen to what they were talking about just because they were incredible athletes. I was blown away by these shot putters. Some of them were really fast. Some of them could tomahawk dunk a basketball standing underneath the rim, because their legs were so strong. They're squatting 700-800 pounds. They could just jump up and dunk.
Oh,
and
yeah.
like, there's got to be something here for me, so I would listen. And I listened to the pole vault guys. I listened to Coach Kern, one of my mentors. I mean, he fantastic technical coach, one of the best pole vault coaches in the world, who was a rookie coach the year I met him. And, I just would listen and try, is there anything here, that I can get from here, either the technical side or something that applies to training or mindset or anything, and then, having that trust is huge. And when I did find, little Baru Elias at Long Beach City, an interesting person to put your trust in for me, because he was hard to understand half the time because his Romanian accent was so thick. But when you see a guy who's working with 2 guys that have jumped 7-8, you're like, I think he knows what he's doing, And it was hard for me too, because I think I've always had that mindset of, not always, but you think I need someone here who not only knows what they're doing, but they had to have done it. Like I used to think they had to have done it. And Elias blew that out of the water, because there was no chance Elias ever jumped anything over 5'4" or something. I mean, I don't know if he ever did the high jump or the long jump or the triple jump. And he was an amazing coach. He had all these guys jumping high, had long jumpers, 25, 26-foot long jumpers, and, in the 50s in the triple. And, these were state championship teams at Long Beach City. They have banners all over the walls from the time he was there. So it was like, crazy. And, so trust is absolutely huge when you have that ability. I think it frees you up, right? Like you don't have to worry
Totally
about all those other things, because you're like, oh, I'm just going to do what he says. It's easier sometimes. I mean, and I've had my share, and I'm sure you've seen it with your coaches, that sometimes the athletes that battle, you put them in a small separate category. There's some people that just always fighting you. I don't want to do it that way. I think this way is better. And you're just like, based on what? what is all your experience taught you about this? It's pretty.
Yeah. I think we always clicked in high school. I mean, we were as just students of the sport. We were always kind of excited coming to every practice and working on stuff. So that trust, we definitely had that there, which was going for us. I think part of it, and a big part of it after kind of getting to college, and I think that's the big goal for a lot of kids who have the potential to go do it, is when their coaches are like, I mean, if you're making CIF prelims, you can go to school for track and field pretty much. If you're getting there to that level, whether it's D3, D2, D1, NAIA, you can go compete in college. You might not be going to Oregon, which is what, of course, your coaches are going to want to tell you, is you're going to go to Oregon or USC or, LSU.
Right.
But you can go compete. And I think a lot of kids get very fixated on, I want to go to this school and I need to do this number. And anything that puts that at risk, I'm going to avoid.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big thing for me, because I trusted every single one of my coaches. I had you and Peggy, and then I had Bo for a while, and alternated between all that. And I think that trust between us was really what got me to 6'10" and 6'8" in high school. Because I was like, I can do this. Like, we changed so many technical things, leaning, staying away from the bar, the waiting. And I think another big kicker was keeping my knee up. Because I used to kick my knee down like a jackhammer as soon as I took off. Right. And it was so counterintuitive, because you're throwing weight back down.
Yes.
And I just started trusting these things. And in practice, I'm like, wow, this is working. Like even in dual meets, I was getting over stuff easily. On days where I wasn't feeling good, I was like, I'm over this with room.
Yeah.
And that trust, I think, just started building. So I thought, I think that's a big part of the coaching relationship is being able to have your athletes trust you.
Yeah.
And I think I was having this discussion with my parents the other day. And I was just like, you've really built this clientele of people who trust you. Like your word is God. I mean, especially seeing from a transition from high school where you were just you were working with me and you were working with Kevin and Aiden and a couple other jumpers at Los Alamitos
Right.
to now. I mean, everyone in our conference knows who you are. You show up to a meet and all these guys are like, Coach, can you get a video of me?
Ah, it's
And I was,
crazy.
and I think that was a huge thing. I'm like people trust this coach now. I mean, Coach Troy, everyone knows this guy, and they're like, he's got the good stuff.
Yeah,
So that was something for
crazy.
me where I was like, yeah, I mean, I always kind of knew that because you took, I think when I started working with you, you took Kevin from 6'2" to 6'9" in 1 year, which is a pretty crazy
Yeah.
progression. And I was
Yeah.
like,
He
I'm
went.
stuck at 6'6". Yeah, let's go see what he's got. And sure enough, I PR'd, Aiden PR'd. I know Kyle went on to PR. I mean, you've got a pretty good record with getting kids some serious progression. And I think that trust that you build is definitely, I mean, it shows with how many people you're working with now. I think that's a huge part of getting athletes to commit to you and be like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah, that's come. It's been a long time coming too, like you said, and thank you for the compliment, Jack. The that it's weird, like you said. It's like it's one thing to sit there and go, I know what I'm doing, and it's another thing to get someone to buy in. And then,
Mm.
when you get the performance to match, because I tell you what, when you guys got to state, my coaching journey's been really, really blessed in a lot of ways. That the very first year I coached at Orange Coast College, I had a state champ. And that was just
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's like the rookie coach winning the Super Bowl. I was like, oh, this is easy. I was like, all we did was we did what we always do. We worked out and she jumped 5'6" and she won state, and then her second year
Yeah.
she runner up. And I was like, what's the big deal? And from that point on, I did 3 or 4 more years at Orange Coast, and I would take someone to state usually every year, but nobody won. And then I languished in high school, for 12 years in Garden Grove League with no really, great kids, but not a ton of talent. And I really didn't have that itch. It just something happened where I got to a place in my life where I was like, I want to start doing this again and start, working with higher level kids. And once we started doing that, Kevin went to the state meet, kind of got a little deer in the headlights at the prelims and didn't make it out of the prelims. And then when we go back the next year, you were there, Aiden was there, and then Kyle signed on right at the end. His coach very graciously said, why don't you take Kyle to the state meet? And you guys placing and you being right there in the mix. I mean, you want to talk about making you young again. I mean, I was just like, I was like right back there. I'm at the state meet. I'm just excited. I'm just like going, man, this is crazy. And we're talking at the end, and I'm like, okay, Jack, you got to pass. You got to start passing some heights, right? Because I'm like, I don't think we can jump every height and get bow, and it's like, that was when I started realizing, I'm like, man, I've forgotten a lot of stuff, like I got caught. I was like rookie mistake, I was like, I needed to be on that earlier. Like I wasn't paying attention because I remember, I think opening height was 6'5" in the final, right? And
It
then it
was,
was
yeah.
6'7", so we skipped 2 inches. But then they started going every inch, and I was like, wait, what are we doing? Why are we going every inch? Okay. And right away my brain was like, well, we can't do that. But then it was like, it was just, I'm like, oh man, I mental note to self, be ready for this next year if they do,
Yeah.
because I personally think it'd be easier. This is one thing I want to do in the high jump for just for intrigue, is they should move the bar up. Because if you watch the international meets, they go what, 210, 215, 220, 225. Then they start going either by fours or by threes. 3 centimeters, 4 centimeter skips for a while, and then three, and then they start doing two. And I'm like, okay, it's all fine and well, but why does everybody want to jump every two? You don't. So why don't we just set it up from the beginning and just go every three? If it's going up an inch at a time, roughly, you and I, if we're sitting there opening up, we're not going to jump every single height. So it's almost like you're back in high school and everybody's going, do you want to do odds or evens? Right? Do you want
Yeah.
to do odds or evens? It's like, well, I'm going to do odds today. What the heck? I've been on the twos for a while. So I went 6'6". I remember in high school, I went 6'6", I went 6'8", I went 6'10". That was the way the bar always went up, and every once in a while, for some weird reason, someone would be like on the odds. And if you were in between, you were struggling with 6'8", you would go, oh, well, maybe 6'7", I can make 6'7", and so you would go odds, and all of a sudden you got a new PR. It's like, okay. So to me, that intrigue would be perfect. Even if the
Yeah.
Olympics, you just go, just set it all up to where you're on one or the other. And if you've got two or three really good jumpers and they're alternating heights as you go up, you've got a new leader every time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, hey, so-and-so's in the lead because he's on the odds. The other guy's on the even. The other guy's clean still at the lower height, and he's going to come back on the next one. So that's something I keep thinking, somebody at the top should just make that switch. It'd be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never even thought about that, but that would make competition pretty interesting.
You've got all those intrigues. I mean, Dwight Stones was famous for it. He was one of the first that I watched that would take a bad jump at a height and then say, okay, well, I'm now trailing. So this height is worthless, literally worthless. The only value this height gives me is the right to take 3 jumps at the next height. But if I don't need 3
Right.
jumps, why bother? So he would miss once at 7.2 and pass and go to 7.4 and only have 2 jumps left and make that and be right back in the lead or whatever. And you're ready to roll. And I'm like, that's just smart. It saves jumps,
Yeah.
all that. Now you have to be really confident. You have to know exactly what you're doing because you are down a jump. But if you're confident that you can make it, if you just did something, you caught it with your calves, or whatever it is, like, okay, I was over. I try to do that in practice with my kids to keep the bar moving. I'm like, oh, you would have had that one. Let's move it up. Instead of
Yeah.
take 2 more where you keep clicking it because you're a little too close or whatever. So, oh, so interesting. So you mentioned something earlier, Jack, that's it's I would just be infuriated by this, but I'm wondering how it's going with you because you mentioned going for the school record because the fact that UCSD has moved from Division II to Division I. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And you guys are not allowed to compete at the NC2A level. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're not allowed to go to conference championships, any championships. So anything beyond the regular season, which is just dual meets. So basically any scoring or ranking meets we're banned from.
Wow, that has got to be one of the dumbest rules. I
It
mean,
sure is.
that's just like, okay, just screw all these athletes over because they're at a program that decided to step up a level. Aren't you going to be disadvantaged stepping up a level?
Well, from what I understand, at least, it is the rule is so that teams that have been scoring in conference don't lose their position right away. Because if we come in, we're going to start messing up the leaderboards, and I think we really saw that this last weekend. If you look at schools like Santa Barbara, I mean, we were right neck and neck with them, if not doing a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it's tough, I think, to in a conference where you've been winning and placing and stuff to introduce a whole growth of new athletes.
Yeah.
And we had a really good, I'm going to give this guy a shout out just because he was one of my mentors on the team, but Jake Selstad was one of our 800 guys, and he was chasing sub 150 for 4 years, and he took an extra 5th year to get it. And he ended up going he went 149, 148, and then I think 147 high at the end of the season. And I mean, it was one of those things where he was always very humble and very appreciative of the sport. And at the end of the year, he was like, the NCAA, man, I mean, we should be able to keep going because we're single athletes. Like at the end of the day, for track and field, because you can apply, and we've applied just for track and field to get accepted, and a couple other sports have been accepted.
Right.
But track and field, it's like we're not a team. So we're not bringing a whole team down once you get to conference. It's individual athletes, and we're keeping individual athletes from doing something amazing. And for me, I always, because I knew coming in we were switching, our coaches made it very, very aware to us. They're like, hey, you're not going to compete at any of these meets. And I was like, well, that's all cool, and I won't get the hardware on the wall. And I was just kind of like, I would rather jump in a program I like, with people I like, and kind of flourish for 4 years under good culture and good coaching. Than I would to go to a school that maybe isn't as, doesn't have the culture or the environment or the dynamic that I want. And so I knew that coming in, and it's kind of been a little disappointing seeing people go on, and especially I had Bo Allen, as you mentioned, he hit me up on Instagram and was like, "Hey, dude, will I see you at nationals this year?" And I'm like, "No, sorry." He's like,
No.
"What about this meet? What about that meet?" I'm like, "Nah, man, sorry. Our season ends 10 meets and that's it."
Oh,
Um, and that's kind of a shame. But what I think is really cool about the sport of track and field is it's a sport of marks. So you could go jump a mark that would have beaten everyone in the country on any given day.
yeah.
And even if they win, they're like, yeah, we won, but this guy beat us. He
Right.
wasn't allowed to compete, but this guy was there.
Yeah.
And that's just an example where I'm like, if I went and did it and I jumped 7 feet and I'm like, they know, like the conference knows that there would have been new people contending for
Yeah.
first, second, third. And so it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, at least I had the satisfaction of knowing I could have been up there versus if you're in a sport like basketball, if you're not at conference or nationals, you never know.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's a sport of winning or losing. So
Yeah.
I think we've gotten lucky to be in a sport where it's okay and you can kind of get these marks regardless. But yeah, it's been tough for sure. And I've seen it upset a lot of athletes, and we've been applying it every single year to the NCAA and specifically to the Big West to let us in early. And it's just kind of been like hey, you're just going to have to wait. So I think we'll be eligible next year. So it was literally the 4 years I was in school. That's when it
Right.
started, and that's when it ended. So definitely tough on the heart of just being like, hey, I'm a guy who wants to compete. I've always
Yeah.
been like that. It'd be
Right.
cool to go, compete in the Big West Conference. But I'm a positive guy, so at the end of the day, for me, it's like, hey, I did all these amazing things in my time at this school. Like my name's up on the boards at the track now. Like that's more than enough for me, at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you still have your shots. Like you said, now you've got your jump memory bank has got
Oh
a
yeah,
couple reps in at 7 3 3/4. So you got and you're still coming up. Real quick, Jack, when you talked about your coach thrashing your shins, go into
yeah,
go into some detail on that, because I know a lot of the jumpers out there their ears are gonna perk up, because you're gonna be like, my shins kill me. I don't know if I've told this story a lot. I've told it to my athletes. I don't know if I've said it here on the podcast. My shins were always bad because we simply overtrained. It wasn't, I
yeah.
don't believe, that I was weak down there or anything else. Well, I used to jump almost every day at practice in high school. I didn't even think about it. And we had a dual meet, and then we had a meet on the weekend. And after the Saturday meet, we'd come back on Monday and we would jump, because you're young.
Mm-hmm.
You recover
Yeah.
pretty fast. You're like, my shins feel okay. Let's go. And so, you would go along, but man, I would take some aspirin every once in a while, before. And, I was majoring in Excedrin at that time, unbuffered Excedrin. And, I woke up one morning spitting up blood, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, there's something wrong with the system, and the only times that I was ever able to get respite from that was when I was forced to rest. I strained my hamstring winning the league title at 6'8" my senior year, and I felt something, and my coach just shut me down for the next week. He goes, we got CIF
Yeah.
prelims next week. You're just going to jog and stretch and do some backovers, And I jumped 6'7" at CIF prelims and was ready to go, and I felt great. That week off was like happened at the perfect time. Unfortunately, run through the state meet after that, I didn't get another week. So it was like,
Yeah.
it started to pile up again. By the end of that, I was like, kind of jumping on razor blades a little bit. I was good for one day. The 2-day state meet kind of got me. I was thinking about that when you guys were jumping. I'm like, I think you and I talked about it too. I said, you're going to recover well because you got the perfect high jumper build. You're tall, you're thin, you're light, you're fast, you're flexible. And I was like, who else is like that in that field? And I remember thinking Tyler Cash is my
Oh yeah.
poster boy for the guy, first of all, who's going to recover easily because he can't weigh more than 150
Yep.
pounds. And number two, he had nothing going. He would qualify dead last. And I remember thinking, talk about no pressure. Got to be the best situation ever, to just go. I didn't even expect to get here the way that was going. And, we'll roll out. But that's a quick
Yeah.
With the 2-day state meet, that was the one I was like, and the year after I did the 2-day state meet, they didn't do it again for a long time. They would just do 1-day state meets. And I was like, where was
Interesting.
I don't think I would have won. My brain used to think I would have won. And I forget, I was jumping against Maurice Crumby, who was 3-time state champ. John Morris, that I mentioned before, he ended up jumping 7.6, 5 or 6 or 7 when he went to Cal. And there was some guys in that field that were really, really good. So it was like, I was on as much of a roll as anybody, but I think when the chips were down, and we never saw the guys from up north, that was the other thing. But
yeah.
So yeah, sorry, we got off on a tangent, but
Yeah.
explain the shin thrashing and what your coach is doing to repair your shins and make them what the knees over toes guy calls bulletproof.
Yeah. So basically, the main thing that we're doing for shins right now is it's called, as I kind of touched on this, but it's called the rudiment, as Coach B calls it. And basically, it's single leg jumps. So we start with some bounds to get your shins warmed up and everything, and it's on the grass. And you'll take single leg forward jumps. So you'll do 20 meters of those, and then you'll do your right leg. And then you'll do single leg, except you're going sideways. So you're jumping, and that puts a lot of strain on your shins, and you have to get your heel down. Because if you're doing it on your toe, you literally won't be able to, because your shins will just start lighting up.
Yeah.
And then you'll do them backwards, and then you'll do them to the other side. And so there's 10 or so workouts of those, and it's all just little small jumps on the grass, and it builds up for sure. And we've had a bunch of people who are just like, oh my God, this workout is terrible. Like it just destroys your shins.
Right.
And so afterwards we do this super long cool down, get ice on them, take an ice bath, elevate your legs, get everything out of them. And it was kind of this thing where everyone was dreading this workout, just dreading it, because it hurt your shins a lot. And you'd be walking around the day after, like on pins and needles, kind of like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, this was just a funny example of it, I guess, that kind of ties into trusting the process. But last Friday, Coach B gives us this little piece of paper every day, because he's like, this is all the workouts on it. So I'm kind of going to observe and coach and give you help. And you guys, if you're confused about anything, can just look down. He hands us the paper, and it has the rudiment on it the day before the meet. And all the high jumpers are like, nope, not doing it. Not doing it. And I was kind of like, Coach, I'll do it. And I think it was kind of that Navy attitude of like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, he's the coach. It's not a mistake that it's on there. He knows what he's doing. It's not him being, like forgetting to not give us a workout. I'm like, he's doing this on purpose. There's a reason, a reason and a method to the madness. And all the other high jumpers were like, you're an idiot. You're going to be hurting tomorrow. And they were kind of like, I'm not going to take the chance. And I was like, Coach, I'm on it. So I went and did it alone. And again, shins were hurting, and I'm like, all right, time to go ice, cool down and everything. And they hurt all through the night. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, it's gone. That's weird. My legs feel really good. I mean, my ankle mobility is good. They feel responsive. I'm like, I wasn't sore on the bus. And I think it was an activation thing where you activate them the day before. And even if it hurts a little bit, you get some ice on there, you take some ibuprofen, the pain will go away, but they're still going to be active and ready to rock.
Yeah.
So I think, it was one of those things of like, the pain isn't always an indicator of you're not going to perform, because stuff's always going to hurt. I mean, ibuprofen kind of at this point goes hand in hand with high jump for me. And that might be a bad thing to say, but I mean, I don't know any jumper who's competing without some degree of pain.
Yeah.
And just kind of embracing that and getting over that fact and being like, this is just part of my sport. Was huge for me. So when Randy started saying these things, and he's like, you just got to go do it, man. And he left it up to the jumpers the day before. He's like, if you really don't want to do it, don't do it. I'm like, I think it definitely wasn't all that shin exercise. I think it was a lot of that attitude as well.
Yeah.
Of just like, screw it, I'm going to do it. Cause I had meets last year. There was one in particular. I had to do my Navy PRT the day of a meet. It was the Fullerton meet, which is actually coming up this weekend. And basically what the PRT consists of is you do your max amount of push-ups in 2 minutes, your max plank, which you have to do around 3.5 minutes. And then you go run 1.5 miles at 5 a.m. in the morning. And it sucks because we get graded on it, and it's part of our package that we submit.
Right.
So you don't really take it easy. You never really are taking these things easy. And I tried to get out of it, and the Navy was like, hell no, man. Like we don't care if you're a college athlete. Like this is your job.
Yeah.
Show up. And I'm like, cool. I'm gonna go do this, and I'm gonna feel like shit, and I'm gonna go take an ice bath before I get on the bus at 6 a.m. in the morning,
Right.
and I'm just gonna go give it a try. Like I've got nothing to lose. Like no one's looking at me. None of my teammates were like, they were surprised I even showed up to the meet. They're like, what? Like, what do you think you're gonna go do after running a mile and a half this morning at pace? And I ended up jumping 6'8", and my coach was like, what is wrong with you? Like, how did you, why were you able to do that? And I think it's just that attitude of, I'm just going to go do it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is just something I got to do. I'm going to have a good attitude, and I'm just going to do it. And I think that was really one of the big changes for me, at least, was just being positive about everything I can in this sport and not doubting myself for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think once you get into that frame of mind where you're doubting or overthinking things, you just lose. You start losing, and
Yeah.
you see it a lot. Like I think that was really the only reason I got to beat Kyle, because he easily could have made 7 feet. I mean, his back was over it by inches every single time. Just catching it with his heels I caught him off guard.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the 6'10" guy going in. I had one miss at 6'9" because I smacked it with my heels.
Yeah.
But it was like I was inches over it and skied it the next time, and then it was just clean through 6'11" and 7 feet. And I think it's tough to play that mental game. But I think that was really the thing of, it's like, oh God, I've got competition now that I didn't expect.
Right.
And I've had it. I had it happen to me with Tyler Cash at state, like you were saying.
Yeah.
These guys come out of nowhere and they start cooking. It's like, holy shit, this was not in the preparations.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cool. I've always loved this sport, and it's always been one of those things where it's so mental, and I love playing the mental game.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things that I think it really teaches you, as opposed to some other sports where, I mean, we have a split second where mistakes are made and records are not there and your name doesn't end up on a board, and I mean, it's milliseconds. So to think of that as an athlete, it's been really cool to learn and to adapt and to get smarter. And that was, I think, all of college really has, for me at least. I haven't gotten that much stronger. I haven't gotten that much faster. I've gotten a lot smarter with how I approach the sport, because I was a nervous guy in high school, really nervous going into every meet, like put so much on it because I'm like, this has got to get me to college. There's scouts here, nah. And now I'm kind of just like, it's sunny. I'm here. It's a Saturday. Right. I'm going to go have fun. Like, I'm going to go enjoy this sport that I love.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing of, I mean, I'm smiling. I don't know if you've seen me these last couple of seasons. Before every jump, I'm like smiling. I'm like telling jokes to myself. Like, and I approach every single jump with a smile on my face. And I think that's kind of the thing of, it's just that positive reinforcement of, I'm going to just do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what
so that's my little spiel, I guess.
Right.
With the mental game in high jump, because I think it's all mental. I mean, I've seen, especially when you get into the intricacies of college athletics. I mean, I've seen so many guys, like you said, that could have jumped 7 feet and just haven't. One particular guy, my teammate Zach from last year. I mean, this guy, talk about power. Like he would take 15 jumps in practice, and he'd be jumping 6'8", 6'8 and a half in practice pretty consistently.
Right.
And that's where I was kind of like, this dude is a monster. Like, and he had some jumps at 6'11", where, I mean, he'd have his back over by 3 or 4 inches, and he'd kick it off, or something would happen. And I think it was one of those things where, and I'm not sure, I haven't talked to him about the mental aspect of it, but I really think it's just, you have to know you're getting over.
Yes.
Even though you've never done it before, and to know you're going to do something that you've never been able to do before, and have that confidence. I think you kind of have to be a little crazy to just be like, I'm going to do this thing that I've never done before, that so few people have never been able to do before. And that confidence, I think, is something that you just have to learn and build and be a student of the sport, for sure.
It's so funny you say that, because I know I've told you and I've told others this, but I said there is not one time that I remember jumping higher than I'd ever jumped before where I didn't know before I left that I was going to make the bar. I don't remember one time. I don't remember going up and going, gosh, I really hope I make it this time. there would be a certain point where you would get to where your training was good, things were clicking, and you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm over this thing. I got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be over it this time. I'm on it. I know what's happening. And you go up and boom. And it's like not a surprise. I can't say that I was like 100% sure. Like if somebody would have stood there and said, all right, gun to your head or $1 million, if you got $10,000 to bet on yourself, would you bet on yourself right now? But, at that same level, there's got to be that, like you said, that kind of an unshakable confidence and a inner calm, like I got this,
Absolutely.
The other thing you mentioned that your coach said that we need to get faster. I have come to a place in the last 2 or 3 years of watching, and for many years, like I said, I just kind of checked out. I was coaching very average levels, high school, and I wasn't really focused on the elites. And I
sure,
there are many years where I would not know any names for any athletes in anything. I might have paid attention in the Olympic years, but I was a typical American, not really paying attention to track and field except once every 4 years, and high levels of competition were, kind of gone by. But since I've started studying, to get better at my craft and to continue to elevate, jumpers like yourselves to higher things, I've noticed that speed kills. Everything's about speed. It doesn't matter what event you're looking at. The world. Oh, yeah. I remember they used to talk about Sergey Bubka, and they said he can run a 10-400 meters with a pole in his hands. I'm like, that's really fast, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's fast without a pole. It takes speed to run and create. You were talking about high jumpers being crazy. We're the second craziest. Pole vaulters are officially insane. You cannot.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
You cannot tell me that and I've done a little bit of pole vaulting, and it's a little bit crazy. So I tell the high jumpers, you're second craziest. I mean, that's probably the second riskiest of all the events. When you leave the ground, there's a chance that you could, fly out of the pit or, something crazy happens. But speed kills. Like high jump is all speed. You watch Barshim approach, you watch Bondarenko, you watch, Drown. These guys are really moving. There's still a few power jumpers around. They might not be moving as fast, but they're moving pretty fast. And then, I watch Krauser throw the shot. I mean, Brian Krauser gets moving through the ring. It's not just grunt. Nobody's doing the glide anymore. Everybody's spinning, so you're spinning through the ring. Same thing with the disc, the javelin approach, everything's speed. So I loved hearing that your coach is like, hey, we got to increase your attack speed. And therefore, if you're running faster, and unless you're, running from a really wide angle, you're going to have to drop in, to that curve and carry a lot more, I'm trying to teach it this way that I remember telling you this, there's 2 leans. You lean back like a long jumper, and you lean to your left because you're simply running on a curve. You have to lean to run a curve efficiently. But I go, there's really 2 things. There's one catapulting you forward, and then there's this one catapulting you up. And I go, you got to use them both, so we got to be far enough away to get the one launch. But I go, anybody can run in a straight line and jump up. Basketball players do it all the time. Volleyball players do it. I go, you just run, you lean back, you drive your knee up, and you can go up and grab the rim. You can go up and spike a ball. You can do all kinds of things. I said, the hard part is to run on a curve and go twisting in the air and then arch over and all that stuff. But I go, the cool thing about it is the catapult that you get out of the curve is additional, because that's where skill comes in. Anybody can do the straight line lean back. That part's easy, but not going to your right at that point is the difficult part. And then,
for sure,
just accentuates all that. So, well, hey, Jack, I got to wrap this up, but I want to do this again sometime, maybe towards the end of the season for you. And I'm just, part of me is I'm elated. I'm so stoked for you, for Aiden, for all the guys that, were once under my tutelage and are stepping up to these levels. And the first thing I told you was, your hard work has paid off, in a big way. And I know there's more coming, and I'm saddened because you don't get to go to the regionals and, those places and do what you can do. So man, just let it all hang out. Let's get that to 2.72, 7.3, 7.4. It's all right there for you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Real quick before we go, I mean, Coach, like, we're here because you helped us. I mean, at the end of the day, I would just say don't sell yourself too short, because we all know that what you have to say is a huge contributor. And I mean, a lot of those lessons still ring true in my head, even today. Definitely as a part of our pedigree. And you talk to Aiden and you talk to some of my old teammates, Leanna and Zach, and they're like, yeah, I mean, he gave me this one tip, and all of a sudden I'm doing all these great things. So
Great to hear.
I definitely think it's not a coincidence that we're all here. I mean, we've got some things going for us. And then the other thing was absolute pleasure talking to you as usual. I had a blast, a lot of fun coming and talking. So hope we can hop back on with some new results to report later this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I reserve the right to get you back on here with a new PR. All right, Jack. Hey,
awesome.
Congratulations again. Double PR days are to be reveled in. Like you said, you're on cloud 9, and, just kind of let that roll into the next one. What do you got next? What's up next for Jack Wiseman and UCSD?
Yeah, we've got Fullerton this weekend, so that's going to be down at Cal State Fullerton, and it's looking a little rainy. So we're hoping on the bright side, tightening in the spikes.
Right.
But we'll see. Again, it's that attitude. We're just going to go kick some ass either way.
You guys going to be at Point Loma again this year?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's
the meet schedule's kind of fluctuating a little bit, but yeah, we should be.
All right, yeah. Let me know. I'm going to be down there because that was the first time I'd seen you last year. That was a fun time to see, you and Leanna, and the NAIA experience has been interesting for me because of that. It's the first time where, the kids that have gone on, because when you're staying at the high school level, you're not going to see anybody again. So just getting even to the NAIA level, there was so many meets that I was at. I was like, it wasn't just an NAIA meet. It would be Division II, Division, junior college. This is like a smorgasbord. And all of a sudden every meet was like, hey, coach, like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. Like, I had no idea you were going to be there. Like, that was so great.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do it. Jack, congratulations. And let's see more great things coming up, man. Can't wait to hear more.
Thanks, Coach Troy. Been awesome talking to you.
All right, sir. We'll see you soon.
Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Jack. And that was the podcast with Jack Wiseman, the senior at UC San Diego. He's a former Sky High and Fly Jump Camps alum, if you will. One of my jumpers, the first one that I got to place at the state meet back in 2019. He and both Aiden Garnett from Edison High School. Jack went to Huntington Beach High School. The two of them placed 3rd and 6th that year at the state. So those were the first athletes I put on the podium, and Kyle Jenkins went with them. And then Kyle probably would have either won or been high up on that list as a senior, but got derailed by COVID. So he jumped 6'10" early that year and didn't get to go. But since then, Kyle and Aiden have both jumped 7 feet. And so Jack was the last one to the party out of that group of athletes. But by no means the least, he took some really incredible jumps at 7.3 3/4 and has the capability of doing something pretty outstanding. So we're looking forward to great things from Jack. And unfortunately, due to the craziness of NC2A regulations, he will not be able to compete at those meets coming up, which he is now qualified for. But hopefully he'll get a mark that will, like he said, make everybody realize that he would have done a great job there at the NC2As and maybe get himself the school record there. So that was Jack Wiseman. We look forward to seeing him again here on Raise the Bar. And until next time, this is Troy Haynes signing off. Keep raising that bar, keep pushing, keep jumping high, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.